5th verse through the 54th verse, and the 28th chapter, verse through the 10th verse. And this is from Matthew, and we're talking about the resurrection of Christ Jesus, and things that go 27th chapter. If you read that, goes through everything that he went through. And this lesson is talking about Christ dies and rises from new life. Jesus may now take charge of Christ. Oh,
You done talked enough. Look, hey, look, I ain't trying to kill you. You don't preach kind of hard and long this morning and stuff, you know. And look here, we all got a little conscience and stuff. Hey, irregardless of whatever things come, I'm still gonna read the lesson anyway, you know. Great lesson, y'all, as usual. Seems like every time you read, you find out for yourself, you find out something different and something new, you know? And that's why it's always good to read the word for yourself and stuff. Christ dies and rises to a new life. Keyword, Matthew 27, 39 to 40, 45, 54, 28, 1 through 10. Keyword, suddenly Jesus met them and said greetings, and they came to him, took hold of his feet and worshiped him. Matthew 28, 9. You know, just like everything else, I don't know, sometime, you know, whether you Palm Sunday coming before Easter and stuff, you know, and Hosanna and stuff, you know, even that, hey, if you read for yourself something, get Hosanna, say, save now, huh?
yeah.
Make you wonder sometime, you know, hey, you think most people consider Hosanna to be a praise word. Hey, Hosanna to God in the highest, you know, and look. And then hey, the author told me, I told you this young man pretty astute when he read his books. They mean save now, you know. Lord, save us. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. You know, sometimes we take it for granted, everything that Jesus went through for us and stuff. Because it's one thing to experience, and it's another thing to talk about. I see, no matter what you talk about, they will never give you the experience. Because if you go through it, and you got a first-hand account of something happening to you personally, you know, it's much easier to talk about. Man, I don't never want to go through that again, you know. And the thing about giving thanks, you know, and what the whole resurrection, you know, theme and process is what Holy Week is all about. And stuff. You know, sometimes people get so caught up, you know. Good Friday is just not another holiday. Good Friday, you know, following Passover and stuff, you know, leading up, you know, to the time when Jesus was making that last triumphant entry into Jerusalem, you know, and you know, sat down and talked to his disciples and talking about, I'm going to go up, you know, and even though he done told them everything gonna happen and stuff, you know, it's like they was in a fog, you know, Lord, they ain't gonna do all this, you know. And sometimes, you know, you listen and then you don't listen, stuff, you know. And you look at all the stuff Jesus suffered for us, you know, think about the crucifixion, you know, and the funny part about it, you know, you know, you look at it and I look at how many of us, you know, we holler about it, you know. I used to look at sometimes talking about Peter, say, man, Peter just a hard rock. You couldn't tell him nothing. He talked a lot of talk, you know, but Peter had good intentions. He just had he got an A for effort, but an F for results, you know.
Peter's like us. I mean, when you look at him denying Jesus the first time, right? I told people there's no doubt in my mind when he told Jesus to get through him, they're gonna have to go through it. There was no doubt in my mind when Peter said that. Peter had his hand on his sword when he said he didn't have a gun, bro. Man. He was ready to kick, but because sometimes out of fear will make us do things totally different.
And the thing about it is, who Pastor Cook, and everybody look at it stuff, you know, you look at the position Peter found himself in, trying to follow along. You know, I give him kudos for following along and trying to follow behind Jesus and what's going on and stuff, you know. Up until that maiden, you know, spotted him by the fire and said, yeah, you were the one following him, you know. And then at before he opened his mouth and stuff, as soon as he said it, you know, he remembered what Jesus had told him, you know. Say, you know, and it's like, oh man, everything I said I wasn't gonna do and stuff. And sometimes, you know, you be a little, you know, and think about it is to die by crucifixion and stuff, you know. Great for the Romans, wasn't so great for nobody else because, you know, you sat down in all the scientific community and sat down there, just what's so painful about death by crucifixion and stuff, you know. The manner and the position you on the cross and stuff, how it caused you to suffer, you know. Just the placement of the feet, you know, because it's like they say all the tendons and the ligaments in your body stretched to the limits because the only way that Jesus could get some relief to be able to breathe was that he had to raise up off the legs with the nails in it, because otherwise his whole diaphragm and stuff was pushing down, you know. And so it was a painful, a brutal way to die. So usually reserved for the worst of criminals and stuff, you know. And the thing about this, if somebody tell me something gonna happen and stuff, and then they turn around and tell me in the same breath, they go, by the way, y'all gonna get in the wind, you know. Say on the moment of when it's time for y'all to step up and be true, say y'all gone. And your disciple, oh no, that's the Lord, no. And then hey, look. And then you're gone, and then you're sitting down there in the upper room somewhere, you're hiding out, you know, because you fear for your life and stuff, and which is a natural. We sit there in the military and talk, flight or fight. Either you're gonna sit there and fight, or you're gonna put it in the breathe. It's, you know, it's one or two reactions and stuff, you know, and being, and I think people forget about being just common, everyday people, because that's what Jesus chose. He didn't choose the cream of the crop, you know, all the top echelon, you know. He took ordinary men and the Father. So, you know, yeah. But then when you sit down and you put to the test and stuff, you know, it's easy with hindsight to say, man, you know, I don't know how y'all could do it and stuff, you know. Yes, you do. Fear causes you to do something, you know. You sit there until you told people today and stuff about sometime, you know, you can get distracted and you can get disoriented, and sometimes, you know, you can get to the point where you ain't paying attention to what's being said. But when somebody, because even when the sons of Zebedee started telling Jesus about what position they want to be like him, he told them, say, y'all don't want to, no, y'all don't want that, y'all ain't know what y'all asking for yourself, you know. And see, sometimes we, you know, as human beings and stuff, you know, we like the glamour, we like the glitz, but we don't want all that go along with it. See,
that's just like the movie A Hard to Kill with Steven Seagal. One of my favorite movies. That the guy, the villain in that Screwface, always said everybody want heaven.
Yeah, but nobody want to die. and sometimes that's bad too, because it's a, you know, when you look at and think about watching, like I said, today's lesson opens that the state where, you know, everybody, you know, Jesus, you know, nailed to the cross and stuff, and exposure and how you die, all the different stuff you go through, exposure, you know, the suffering. And it says today's lesson open, you know, that is the state in which we find Jesus, you know, being nailed to the cross and stuff, you know, and all of the stuff he promised. And I think it's ironic, you know, discussion how everybody holler about, oh, didn't he say it? They'll just get up all that, how people just outright lie sometimes, you know, all the witnesses that was gathered. Funny thing too about this time period and stuff, in order to say you did it or not, they had to get 2 or 3 people to come against you to say, well, Monet said he's gonna do this, you know, and he said, yeah, didn't he say he's gonna destroy the temple in 3 days and raise it up and stuff, you know? And I think a lot of people, you know, forget about, you know, speaking not physical, literally talking about the temple, you know, the temple, the body, you know. That in 3 days he would die. Found it interesting in something this morning, finished reading this and last night and stuff, how about said Jesus, you know, and that kind of never looked at it in that sense and stuff. That Jesus re-entered a physical body, you know, when he was resurrected, you know, and it kind of kind of get you. Never heard nobody preach on that. Never heard nobody talk about that particular point. You know, Pastor Brother on that and stuff. You know, because most people look at it and say Jesus got up, you know, and out of the tomb. And guess what? The same corpse that you laid in was the same corpse that he got up with.
Yeah.
You know, but most people never talk about it
They don't talk about
in that sense. You know.
And that's what, as a matter of fact, I was gonna use that in my review. You did about that resurrection.
Yeah.
But before you go there, I'm gonna go back to something you said. You mentioned Good Friday.
Mm-hmm.
To that, I made a comment to Sister Linda because they got out of school early on Good Friday. I said, you know what, people that don't believe shouldn't get out early. You don't believe, but you know, we quick to celebrate a holiday.
It's holiday, you know.
But what I was gonna say, I don't think a lot of people really realize when we talk about Holy Week,
Mm-hmm.
what all Jesus did during that week.
They don't.
He was on his deathbed. Jesus knew he was going to die in 7 days, but yet he was still teaching. You know, one of the only times he got mad when he threw people out there. The temple,
Yeah.
But yet he's, you know, of course, cursed the fig tree and all that, but he was still doing what thus says the Lord. He was still trying to teach and, you know, and preach.
And the thing makes it so bad, when you read the physical description about where Jesus was, and he's talked about all the time, Capernaum, you know, being the city of rest for Jesus and stuff. But to go up they said go up and to elevation just to get to Jerusalem. You're talking about you got to go almost 6 or 7 miles straight up the mountain just to get there. You know, and to go through all the stuff, you know, and to get there, you know all that's going to happen to you once you get there. You know, and you talk about it, stuff, but yet you still go and stuff, and we take for granted. People mocking him, you know, spitting on him and stuff, you know, and belittling him, talking about, he gonna tear the temple up, 3 days he's gonna rebuild it and stuff, you know, but because they, you know, they didn't want to hear, because let's put it this way, same thing with most people resistant to change. We don't want to, and look, change means that you got to give up something that you enjoy doing.
You got to give up something and you got to learn something.
Yeah, something new and different and stuff. So,
Before you go from that, the pastor was talking about Good Friday. And I was reading this and I saw something that I hadn't seen before, but I always believed, and that's on page 53, at the top of the page on the right-hand side of that column, underlined, it said, when it was talking about he was mocked, and Aaron said he would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. And that next sentence right at the top, it said, interestingly, the crowd that welcomed him to Jerusalem were silent or not present to support him. You know, you always heard people say, and pastors preach and say, those same people that were welcoming him in, they were at the run, you know, crucified. But this whoever wrote this said that, interestingly enough, say the crowd that welcomed him to Jerusalem, they either were silent and were not present.
They were. We say it because it makes good preaching.
Yeah.
They yell Hosanna on Sunday and crucify.
But what I'm saying is that the problem is a different group of people. You know, you have supporters. They didn't just change. If they believed in Jesus, they didn't just change overnight. You know, next day or whatever. There were people that were against him to start with or didn't believe him and those things. We have that same thing today. You know, like people in elections. You know, it may be for you today. It's not going to change the next day, but as you go along, you might. That was
same thing like.
And sometimes they don't speak up. You know, you got people who are
paid people
for you. They're not going to speak up and say things for you. They'll be silent.
It's funny, right? And like I said, it makes for good preaching. That's why we do it. But really and truthfully, the same thing Peter had just done. It's the same thing the crowd.
Yeah.
It is doing. Peter didn't speak up. He still loved the Lord, but he didn't speak
He'll
up.
speak up, right?
Because people fear the Roman government more than they fear the Lord.
Well, this is,
So
and right here too, a very key point too, is that the Jewish leadership had already decided
mhm,
that it was expedient for one person to die
Yeah.
than for all of them to suffer.
Yeah.
Because basically, what Jesus was doing,
mhm,
based with the Roman tradition. Romans didn't care what religion you serve as long as you didn't stop the normal process of their business. And see, the thing about it is, the Jewish leadership was the one
Yeah.
who told the people to make a choice between Barabbas, and Jesus.
4 points.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, see, so it was like they basically done these people was plants.
They did everything they,
Yeah.
not only plans, it was more, they were looking at their own personal interests.
That's the God. The God.
And I think that's this young man, what he's saying
Yeah.
is that
Yeah,
they were either not present or they didn't speak up.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times in life, this is the point I want to make, was that, even our community and commissioners meet and everything, you might believe one thing and don't say anything. At a church meeting, nobody won't say nothing, but when they get in the parking lot, everybody got a point, that and other, they won't speak up. So if you were silent, I think what Dr. King said, you
Silence, silence,
silence is
Right.
sin.
Yeah,
Yeah, from that, I support you, but I can't.
Yeah, but
Yeah, right.
I show up to the mission meeting.
Right.
I
Right, exactly.
can't hold you.
And that's what happened in a lot of situations, even, just right now, in communities and everything. I know at Quincy probably.
Oh, yeah. Well, you guys said what's important, the commissioners fighting so much, you don't know which side, you like double that, you just trying to shut this.
It's a shame that even today, similar circumstances exist, and that people, the word tells us that you, as a Christian, you're supposed to stand for righteousness.
Right.
Like Brother Monet said, ain't nobody gonna put their, say how many people willing to put your neck out on the line, say just for righteousness' sake and stuff. Most people say, I support you, Brother Monet, but I just can't do it in public.
Right.
You understand? And the thing about this stuff is that we got a whole lot of, and then the thing that one that gets me and stuff is, and I look at people sometimes, and it's very applicable to the situation where they say, be careful who you choose to appoint over you to represent you. See, everybody that's elected ain't good for you, and everybody that's supposed to be speaking for you, and like I was talking with you, Pastor, sitting down there with them people for the last 6 years up at City Hall and stuff, and they ain't scared to verbalize what they feel, and they sit down there, well, some of your leadership, and you ain't gonna sit there with them, you ain't gonna talk, because I really don't get in a discussion about nobody black, down and nobody black around, but they will tell you though, well, if they change leadership, and I know me, you sometimes you want to be the little vice assassin, well, who it is y'all don't like? You put it out there, and they'll tell you. And they'll put it right there and tell you, Ella Davis and Dan, it seems like every time they come to a city commission meeting, it always turned into a farce, a lot of arguments and stuff. I said, one thing about it, in time, if the devil already in the room and the devil come in the room and stuff, guess what? You just got a couple of devils in there, you're gonna never agree. Sometimes we forget about that ordinary people sometimes don't want to do extraordinary things and stuff, because like you said, Pastor, ordinary men became extraordinary because touched by Jesus. They saw a whole different, and see, no matter what they went through, in the end, they died for the cause. See, now that's the thing to get it. They say, well, why did it take Peter so long? One point it took Peter so long, it just took him a while to get there, but he got there. He got there, And sometimes with us and stuff, we all go through a lot of challenges sometimes that cause us, you have to make a decision, but you have to have, as a man or woman, you got to decide. you know?
And the thing is, and that split second, sometimes you're gonna make a decision and it's not gonna be the right decision,
Not all the time.
right? But like, when you look at this, I tell people, when you look at Judas
Mhm,
and Peter, right? Both of them made decisions,
mhm.
right? Wrong decisions, right? But the difference is Peter was able to deal with his grief a little different than Judas. Peter was still able to admit he was wrong right then and there and tried to reconcile. Judas, on the other hand, if he would have just tried to reconcile, Jesus would have forgave him.
You know,
So you
Man, what
just
did
keep
he
moving.
when they say he repented? Judas repented
Yeah.
and then committed suicide.
Yeah,
And then took his
right,
life.
right. He
Did he repent of his sin and repent of what?
he admitted he did wrong.
When did he
Right.
do wrong?
But watch this. When Peter did it, Peter admitted he was wrong because that's what Jesus told him he was gonna do it. That's why he felt bad because
he didn't know too.
of he wanted everything he can. I believe to apologize to make things right with Jesus. Judas on the other hand, and this is me, he repented, but he didn't still want to make it right. So
Can I say one
yeah.
more? Let me, I got a book too, you know, about who really killed Jesus,
Mhm.
and about Judas. Judas got mad about a lot of things.
Mhm.
First of all, Judas was rich.
Mhm.
Judas had already been part of the Sanhedrin, you know, his whole family. He had been taught by, you know, one of the 2 or 3 top teachers. He was astute in Judaism and stuff, you know, but Judas' problem was Judas, like most people wanted, he wanted Jesus to come, the Son of God, to come as a military leader, you know? And because Judas had gave up all his money and all his prestige to support, you know? See, Judas Judas probably one of the few people that when Jesus, you know, allowed to become one of the disciples that, you know, Judas was a rich man. You know, his family was wealthy. You know, they was connected. And Judas was already, you know, he probably had a different variation of how he dealt with the Romans. You know?
So could it be that really what it boils down to between both of them, Judas and Peter? Peter humbled himself, but Judas was still dealing with pride.
Yes, he said that he said he
his
wanted.
pride-
He
his pride
felt like
was-
Jesus had let him down. Jesus didn't come with the whole legion of army, you know, angels behind him, you know, destroying the Romans, you know. And sometimes, you know, we resist stuff sometimes, Pastor, you know, when they don't go our way, you know.
We can't get over that first
And the thing about it is, look how Judas argued with the woman, you know, when she was anointing Jesus' feet and stuff, you know. First thing Judas hollered was, man, you know how much money we could have made from selling precious ointment, you know? And so,
I'm
you
just
know,
reading about Judas.
Mhm.
Yeah, somewhere I read this some time ago about Judas. I think he hung himself, right?
yeah.
And they said that he had some help dying because I think it tells in the scripture that his intestines
Well, somebody
cut
cut him
him
out.
out. Cut him out now.
He had some.
He must have somebody else.
Yeah,
They're saying that somebody else, but
What they probably felt that he was going, if he would have got to Jesus,
Mhm.
right? They'll find out who really paid him.
Yeah.
You know, so they were trying to cover themselves.
Well,
some of the people.
Yeah.
The religious leaders,
money.
that third piece of silver, the religious leaders probably took him out, you know?
And the thing is, the other thing is too, and it's something I need to do some more looking into, and I will. With Judas, one of the disciples, it was somebody that had to do it,
Mhm.
right? So was Judas already predestined
I think so.
to do it,
I think
or did he succumb
well,
to what he was already used to, because his upbringing,
Yeah,
the love of money.
but
But
remember
then
when
Jesus said, "Some
Jesus
one of
told
you will betray me."
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I guess predestined. He knew.
yeah, well, not only that.
He had a choice.
He-
But
he-
he knew.
Well,
It
I
was
think
already.
And that's the question,
Yeah.
and that's the question I got.
I figured he got asked us, he say, go and do what you gonna do and do it quickly.
And that's the question I got to research a little bit more. Did he really have a choice? If Jesus already knew he was
He
gonna do it,
predestined.
No,
he
he
was
knew.
predestined. You
Predestined.
know, that's,
I mean,
that's a good debate, that makes a good debate, right?
you were predestined to do it. He knew that it was predestined that it was going to happen.
Well,
You know, it's not that Judas was born and he was going to kill you.
Yeah, and so that's what I want to look into more, because I believe it was just like the Pharisees, when every time Moses had to talk with the Lord, and the Pharisees and the Lord told Moses, "I'm gonna harden his heart."
mhm.
It was because it was already in him.
Well, he had been picked for that job.
Yeah, it was already in him. So he said, "Succumb to."
Well, and that's.
To me, it's like, things that we do.
Yeah.
We have freedom, right?
We have free will.
Free will, right? So, I mean, God already know we're going to do it. He knows we're going to do it. We don't know it, but he knows what's going to happen beforehand.
Yeah.
But therefore, he doesn't predestine that we can do it, but he knows what.
Well, and then also brought on that, God appoints certain people to do certain jobs. Just like Moses.
Yeah.
Moses was picked.
Yeah.
You know, he was saved when he saved out of the Nile by Pharaoh's daughter. You know, Moses was already picked for a specific job, you know.
I don't know if I did that sermon here. It's a dirty job, but somebody got to do
Yeah,
it.
somebody, and the thing about it stuff is, and the thing about it is, remember we talk all the time and stuff, that a lot of people live their whole life and don't know what their purpose
Purpose is.
for living is, you know, and the Bible lets us know that everybody, you know, you got a signed destiny that you got to fulfill before you leave here, you know, and see, I used to tell my grandma about job in the church. I used to tell her, so I say, Grandma, I don't want that job. I said, you got to work at that job, you know.
Right. And the other thing is too, all of us, I did another term, be careful who you break bread with.
Yeah.
Because everybody, no matter who it is, you're gonna have a Thomas, you're gonna have a Peter, you're gonna have a Judas on your team.
Oh, yes.
And if you don't have one, maybe you the Thomas, the Judas.
No, that's
I
it.
did a sermon here about warming yourself around the
Yeah.
wrong fire.
Yeah.
That people sitting around the wrong fire.
But so, you know, and that's something to think about. But look how Peter and death,
Yeah.
you know, was eulogized, you know, as being, you know, faithful, you know, and Judas, you know, by you know, I'm thinking about Judas, you know, hey, look, somebody, it's a shame too, somebody, you give you 30 pieces of silver and stuff, they have somebody killed it, then they throw it back in your face because they can't use it because of the blood money, you know? And, you know, so sometimes, you know, when you do a thing, and that's what people forget about sometimes, even us today and stuff, you know, look, when you deliberately, me and Ness got in a discussion about this last night, say people who deliberately, Pastor, go out of their way to hurt somebody else and say, something wrong with you, you know? Because it's just not of God, it's not natural for you to want to just completely destroy somebody else, you know? Yeah, you might get mad at them and stuff, want to hold on to stuff, you know, but, you know, but that's just, you know? And the thing about it is when you do that and stuff, you know, you forget about the fact that you hurting yourself, you know? And the thing about it is when I look at, you know, even taking place from the resurrection, the crucifixion, all that and stuff, you know, what I see, you know, the big picture of it and stuff is, look, the same religion that the Romans fought so hard, you know, to get rid of, it took over the whole, it took over the whole world, you know. So what you tried to get rid of, it prospered, you know, and it went throughout the whole world and stuff, you know. And a lot of people say it's one of the major downfalls for the fall, the destruction of the Roman Empire, because they couldn't control, you know, what was happening internally, you know. And sometimes we, you know.
And it's still, and Christianity is still the most scrutinized, talked about.
Oh yeah.
I was, Yeah, the airport in Tallahassee, I walked into the bathroom before I went to TSA. And somebody was in the bathroom, and I don't understand why people be in the toilet talking on the phone loud. And having a conversation about Satan and all of that. And I didn't even listen to it, but you need to go look, go read, go this. It ain't, you know. And I'm thinking to myself, do people realize that regardless of how they feel or what they say, what are they trying to get out of it? I mean, you trying to get somebody else not to like Christ, because you know.
Are you trying to influence something?
What are you getting out of it? And I had a conversation with somebody one day just about Christianity, about Christ, and all of that. And I asked him, I was like, okay, and your point? Well, you following something that ain't true. I said, so what are you following? And I just follow the sciences. I said, okay, so you follow Scientology? No, I just follow science. I say, so what are you trying to get me to do? I'm trying to get you to follow science. I said, I follow the one that made the science.
That's right. And the ones that every time science dig in the ground, go up in the air.
So I said, so what are you trying to get? So it amazes me, even, and I said that to say this, even with the Romans, they were convinced that the person they saw was who he was.
Yeah.
So we got to realize today, because we can't see him, people are convinced that he's not who he say he is.
And that,
But you got to have that personal
that's
encounter.
fine. That's fine too, and that's what the centurion had. See, the centurion, he at the end, the centurion
Right.
would have been a bad candidate for the Roman army because he's been,
This
like,
man was true.
this man, he's truly son of God. And I'm gonna share some with y'all and stuff. It ain't a whole lot of people I share it with and stuff because you don't never know. It's about being where you're meant to be. I had a friend one time in Tallahassee, Pastor. She called me one night. I live about 10 miles outside of Tallahassee, you know. So she called me. I went back home, got her home, and selling in. And didn't want to waste no gas. And she called me and said, "What you doing?" I said, "Nothing, just sitting here." I said, "How about coming on, going to the law review office with me? I got to do some work tonight to finish up something." So part of me was saying, "No, I don't want to go and stuff," because it was my best friend. Whatever I asked her to do, she would, try to help me. So I said, "Well, give me about 10 minutes now. I come get you." Funny thing about it and stuff is, half of me was saying, "No, don't go." But guess what? The same night that I went and picked up and went to the law review office with her, it was the same night Ted Bundy killed all the co-eds. And see, Ted Bundy had been a student at the law school. He probably knew my friend Jack.
Yeah.
That I was sitting there working. So, and show you how bad it was. Me and her started working, but she in 2 or 3 hours, she got me reading all these first and second year law students, all the paperwork and stuff. And all of a sudden, by 12 o'clock, she finally get through. We walk out the building. I walk out the building, I'm thinking it's the Tallahassee Police Department breaking up a party or something, because this sorority road, And then I dropped her back at home, and I went back home, and then the next day I come in the school newspaper, got these 10 co-eds plastered all on it, and I'm saying, and I looked at Jack, and Jack looked at me, I say, 2 of them got killed right across the street in the apartment from the law review. See, and I'm saying, I say, "Jack, I'm here with you." And I said, "What if you had been, just happened if you had been in the law review by yourself that night?" And people, co-eds dying all around you and stuff, and just so happened I'm sitting there with you. Because you would have been leaving the thing, walking the 2 blocks to go home. Sometimes you don't never know what's meant for where you could be and stuff. So sometimes that inner mind be talking to you sometimes. But if you listen, and see, a lot of times we don't want to listen to what that inner spirit is telling you. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't, because if you do that, few other things I found out about the lesson too and stuff was that, you know, we all know Mary Magdalene, no such person. Magdalena was just a place where she lived at,
Yeah.
you know, and that thought it interesting, like Ramona, you get to reading sometimes, people put something out, tell me would have took 300 priests just to hold up that one complete cross that was a veil that was ripped from top to bottom. Now, you know, that's a heavy piece of cloth, single piece of cloth, and it takes 300 priests to hold it, to try to put it up. You know, see, sometimes when you read for yourself, you find out stuff, you know, and sometimes people forget about all the stuff that happened during the time when Jesus actually said, me and this coming home, some man was saying, when Jesus said it is finished, he gave 3 different reasons or meanings for why the word it is finished, you know. Say, you know, a military reason and a reason why, you know, the work was completed, you know. And I looked at him and said, baby, you the man. See, I hear exactly what this man saying and stuff. But the thing that hit me was, and you alluded to a little bit there, stuff, at the moment of death, you know, dead got up out the grave, earthquake, you know, lightning and everything, you know, just the whole everything changed, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Dead people started walking, you know. I mean, that in itself would have been enough for me to wonder. Look, I gotta find somewhere else to go and stuff.
You see some dead people walking around the house and the alley back there.
Yeah. Boy, look here. Let me tell you something. Sometimes, you know, you get there, you know, and everybody, you know, and you start looking like you know how people talking about Pastor looking for signs and stuff, you know. And
I'm sad right there.
Yeah.
We're talking about the earthquake.
Mhm.
What I didn't really realize, I guess I read it several times,
Yeah.
but there were two earthquakes. The one, the first one rolled away the stone,
Yeah.
and the second one opened the grave. But I never, you know, just look at it like that. It registered. I guess I read it, but it's two. And that's in what, 2 days? 1 day?
Yeah. But then, look how most people have. Oh, the angel came. How many times have you heard the angel came and rolled the stone away? You know, and see, so sometimes, you know, you got to read for yourself.
Like I said, a lot of the stuff.
It sounds good.
It makes good preaching.
Good preaching.
Because it gives you an illustration, right? Because a lot of us ain't been in earthquakes. But yeah, no, and that's something that I had to look at, especially with this, with me and my new walk.
Yeah.
And my new season with preaching without notes. Now, it's forcing me to study not only that lesson, right, but it's forcing me to go back and look at some other stuff to get a better understanding, so I can sit there and not because it used to be I just write it.
Yeah.
Because it's right there. But now it's forcing me to internalize it and picture it. And the first question I asked myself when I looked at this with Mary, with Mary Magdalene, then I bring Sunday school lesson. I'm like, hold on, that's too different. I need to see what was what, and realizing that John did a more personal account.
He did.
And that's what our relationship with Christ should be. All of us should have a personal encounter, personal relationship. Some people hadn't had that personal encounter yet.
And see, that's the one. You know, like I was telling you about coming upon 50 years between the time I hit that bridge. You know, and I heard people talk all my life talking about, if you ever hear the still quiet voice, and to actually hear that sweet still quiet voice on that bridge at 2:00 in the morning. I mean, everything had to be just right, Pastor, for me to survive that night. You know, I mean.
That second point, he had to put you in the right position.
I mean, let me tell you something. I mean, look, this the tire. I was on the rim of the tire going over. I'm sideways in the car. When the thing said, throw your body to the right. You know, look, one time, I heard it faintly one time. And to put 2,000 pounds, you know, what if I jerked the wheel? I mean, everything. And I told him, I said, I know my 2 angels had to work overtime. I said, for the first 25 years of my life, boy. all my mom and daddy knew that when I called them, say, I'm all right, where you going this week?
Right.
And I would tell them what direction I was heading in, so if they needed to look for me, where to find me.
Knowing that, just reading about Black history, in certain ways about preaching,
Mhm.
you know, in slavery time, it was preaching. A lot of people couldn't read,
Right.
and so they would embellish things. You know?
Yeah.
They would make it
Uh-huh.
sound good, and they would say,
Right.
you know, Jesus came out of the grave and he knocked on the door,
So,
and he knocked this down.
mhm.
You know, those things took the key from the devil. You know, those type of things.
Yeah.
It makes a good story
Yeah.
because, you know,
Like you said.
they had knowledge of it, and then they would add to
They
it
were adding to it.
and embellish it so that they could make it.
Yeah, they were doing their parable of the story. And the thing is, it's been passed down from generation to
Right.
generation. And you have to think about it. It hadn't been but really the last 15 years or so, and maybe even not that, where you can go and look for it for yourself.
Right, exactly.
you know,
Pull it up.
Put it for yourself. You got to do. You can Google it. You can look at Hebrew. You ain't got to read Hebrew. You can just type it in, and
Right.
it tells you the meaning. It tells you where it's at. So we have more knowledge now. So really, the truth for us is Christ has got to kind of change the way.
Just people can look up, you know, they can pull it up right there in the view.
But it's in these. On the flip side of that, it's these settings that people need to come to and realize that preaching is out of the foolishness of preaching. You know, so it's not embellished. It's just it's allegory. It's illustration itself.
It's both, I think.
Yeah.
Embellishing that.
Yeah.
We had a double, we had a two-edged sword, because the Black Bible, the slave masters had and stuff, it pointed out how
Certain stuff.
servants supposed to follow your masters. It's a whole different Bible.
Yeah.
And plus the Africans, when they got here, that's how they learned roll call, chant, and recall. It was passed down, this thing was passed down to each generation because the stories was told. You know, and sometimes when you forget the story, you don't know that's how some information was lost.
Because
Because
even with the hymn, like they used to line hymns, you know, they'd read a line or two, sing it, and read. And some churches still do
They still
that.
do
They have hymn books, people couldn't read. A lot of
they line it, say it,
And then they line it.
and then you read it aloud.
Yeah,
One person read it aloud. So
And then they would sing it, you know.
And you know, you still have some preachers that do that when they're preaching. I have somebody read,
Right, yeah.
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 and it was because the preacher tried the one person that could read, and had them read while
It makes your job easy.
it makes it.
It makes your job easier. You know, and plus too, I told somebody the time we were sitting there talking to it, and I think people take for granted stuff. You know, some people are here to self-talk, and I look at all the people hollering about, you know, speaking in tongues, Pastor. You understand?
Mhm.
And then I tell somebody one time we was in there, we used to have one lady, boy, you go into some churches, every Sunday, you know, somebody would get up and say, you know, and then everybody holler about, you know, you ain't got nobody to interpret, you shouldn't be jumping up saying something, nobody can understand it, you know?
That's scripture tell you.
Yeah, well,
It's present in the church.
you know, and sometimes we, like I say, we don't have so much pieces here and there and stuff, what fit to make
Right.
a church work and stuff, you know, and I still believe in, like they say, you know, in the latter days, you know, itching ears, people going on to tune in to what they want to hear. And see, right about now, our biggest problem now is that we thought a lot of the two generations right up on us, age-wise, especially me and Brahma, that, you know, 2 years on us. But guess what? That fourth and fifth generation, them folks don't believe it. Look, they tell you, look, I'm going to church, but you know, if I want to get some Jesus, I just turn on one of the little evangelist stations on TV and stuff, you know, and they don't see the need for this stuff, you know.
They don't see the need for it because
And one of the biggest things that me and my youngest son, he just turned 50 years old, I was about, oh, I ain't going to that church getting the people all the money. I say, you ain't getting nobody no money. I say, if you're doing it right, you just paying what God asked you for, the little 10%, you know, plus your free will offering if you want some blessing, but they don't even want to pay that, Pastor. And we just, probably this little 15-year-old boy we walk and kill himself. last week. I mean, had his 2 younger siblings in the house with him. Mom and Dad went to Panama City to shop. And it happened in Weaver all the time. They don't talk about it as much. They say this 15-year-old boy went into the pantry and shot himself 2 times with a gun. 2 times. He shot it, squeezed it 2 times. He shot himself 1 time and then killed himself, shot himself again. And then his mama and daddy had to call somebody, family members, call the police, and they went there, because the other 2 kids was there. And the boy shot himself, so dead, 15 years old. And it happened all the time.
Yeah, because LSU football player that I think was in a high-speed chase and police and shot himself.
See, I mean,
on the star receiver.
Yeah, I mean, doing crazy stuff, man. I mean,
we're living, we did some crazy stuff when we were growing up, and it was only because this is me saying it. It was because our grandma and great grandma prayed for us, prayed us through them situations, and that's what we're doing now. Trying to pray these generations through, but
it's getting rough. And they added a little personal touch to us because they would tighten up. As you read about now, see all the rules that all the stuff that we thought might have been bad or hard. Old folks would say, either gonna make you stronger, it ain't gonna kill you, but it'll make you stronger. It'll make you endure. And these kids got a lot of problems. And if you don't talk to your kids and talk to your kids the right way, I mean, my oldest granddaughter, her mama put in a private school, and some little white boy come up to her because she could have braided. Oh, you got them little nigger knots on your head, Told her mama. Mama went out there and, talked to people there, and then the boy got suspended for 3 days, for uttering racial slurs, because they sat down and tell her, you don't let nobody talk about you. You go to, so she went to the head lady master, whoever it was and stuff, and got the boy parents and got him in there, and he got suspended, for uttering racial,
the saying ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
It flows 2 ways.
Yes.
And if I can tie back into something we were talking about earlier, on both sides of that, the little white boy ignorant because he's hearing it from a parent, from home. And your granddaughter was blind to the fact because she was, taught the
stand up.
What we've been through.
Yeah.
When we talk the history, that's just like the early church. We were getting away from the tradition, and you have to a certain extent, you got to take the tradition and make it new. But you also got to teach the people why we do what we do, why the AME Church is so big on social justice.
Yeah.
Because of what happened.
Yeah.
And tying that back into the lesson, when people talking about, he said the temple would be torn down in 3 days and he can't even save himself. That's because they didn't understand and wasn't properly taught what he really meant. And watch this. Didn't ask the question. What do you mean?
Didn't want to know.
And didn't want to know.
So steep in Judaism, that was a whole different set of values, And see, sometimes not being flexible.
Yeah.
You close yourself off.
Right.
And my daughter had to finally tell my granddaughter, baby, not only you gonna be a lady, you're a young lady, you don't let nobody talk to you like that. You got to stand up for yourself, because she's already soft spoken,
right,
and not confrontational, But and it's getting, like I say, if you don't talk to your kids, if you want to lose them to the streets, boy, look here, be silent.
Keep talking to them and not to them.
That's right. You got to talk to them, And you got to explain to them that, look, I didn't do everything right. I didn't do it as I was everything but. I told her, look, the first 25, I even put it so far to say the first 25 had going on 30 years of my life, you know, it was still some shakiness in it, you know?
How much is it?
10.
Yeah, it's 10. So it's 20.
So, you know, but you know, that thing, Pastor, and it fit me for years, all my life, say, to thine own self be true.
True.
Don't lie to yourself, you know, because if you lie to yourself, you lie to somebody else.
Okay, I'm just gonna do the secretary's report.
Okay.
And, church school is open at 9:40 with the singing of He is Lord, the Apostles' Creed prayer, and the lesson text. Christ died and rises to new life. Matthew 27th chapter, 39th through the 40th verse, 45th through the 54th verses, 28th chapter, 1st through the 10th verse. Key verse, suddenly Jesus met them and said, "Greeting." And they came to him, took hold of his feet and worshiped him. Matthew 28th chapter, 9th verse. Total pupils present today, 4. Total contribution today, $40. Clarence Net, Superintendent, Reverend Chris Jordan, Pastor. Any corrections or additions?
No.
Okay, secretary reports and approved. Pastor is in your hand.
Thank you. Good morning, sir. Superintendent and teacher, another cliche, another great lesson. In reading the lesson, a couple of things that stood out. And like I said, I'm in this season now, even with my preaching and teaching, to try to ask questions that I have, that preach or teach from them questions. Some bothered me. I shouldn't say bothered me, but last week, it might have been last week or the week after, or a week before that, we were talking about the resurrection and people that die in Christ. And then we get to the lesson this morning, and the first thing we get to this lesson. The first thing, what verse is it? Verse 52. It looked like I don't. That said. Let me get back to it. And the graves were open, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose. I had to ask myself on that. It says they rose. Thessalonians, Paul says, the dead in Christ, the angels and archangels, the dead in Christ will rise first. And meet him in the air. So, Lord, you got to help me. Where's my grandma at right now? Where's my great grandma and grandma at right now that done died? Right? Have they risen? Are they still there? And after looking, when we talk about here in verse 52, it was as Lazarus. They got up again and started walking. They were in Jerusalem again for a little while. These dead folks, they were in their same bodies. So they were physically walking around again, as you mentioned with Jesus. Jesus came back when Mary saw him, and they saw him again on the road to Galilee. He was in his same body. This wasn't a resurrection. This was them in their same bodies. What Paul is talking about is the bodies, the physical bodies, to be absent from the bodies and present with the Lord. So grandma and all those that have passed on, their spirit is with the Lord. Their body is still in the ground. So what they're talking about is these two different things. What they're talking about when we look at it, because this is say resurrection, right? And Paul is saying resurrection because we have a new body. So our souls are in heaven waiting on the second coming of the Lord. So the bodies will be resurrection into a new form. And when soul meets body again, So all this time, bro, on that, I've been fighting with that question about what with this, the Lord, family put the light bulb on it and merge both of them together. It's not talking about two different things. It's two different things, but it's the same in one. Everybody that has died before, their spirit is with the Lord. The spirit is in heaven, or it's in one or two places. When Christ comes back the second time, the resurrection is going to be the bodies that's going to be transformed. So I thought that was amazing to me.
Yeah, that's why this so miraculous, this whole chapter, because and that is I did some research too. Now this first time I see somebody put it in a book print too.
Yeah.
About the blood sweat.
Mm-hmm.
I did some research at one time. I even had to find out what the word was.
Yeah.
And scientifically I say, because they hit me say, how is this possible? It's like Jesus in Gethsemane.
Mm-hmm.
Say prayed so hard and sweated so hard, it was like blood was falling off of him instead of sweat.
Right.
But didn't it say, Pastor, when Christ died on the cross, he went back into and preached to those people who had died before he
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that was
those the ones that were in the grave rose.
that was, and they rose, right? He went and preached to them. They rose and were actually
had that opportunity to
hear him.
Well, it was kind of Hebrew 11.
Yeah.
They didn't, they didn't want the grace system. They just were being faithful.
Faithful, right? Yeah. So they were Lazarus. They were the Jairus' daughter. They rose again in that same body form, and probably transitioned again later on. And now their souls have transitioned.
And then Jesus come back.
Yeah,
the dead in
Christ.
Christ.
The bodies will.
The dead in Christ.
Christ.
Those are the ones that have had that opportunity.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
Right.
And you got to make a
Right.
decision.
And those,
Yeah.
and they've accepted him.
Accepted him. Right.
And
Right.
it's funny too, Pastor, because that's one point one lesson we had here about like 3 or 4 lessons ago. All those people, except for Jesus, they died.
Uh-huh.
They all died again. Lazarus and all of them.
Yeah.
They don't never say how long they live after they came back, but they all died
Right.
again. So,
Remember they were talking, he had a parable about,
Mhm.
the rich man asking.
Yeah.
Go back.
Yeah.
My
They
brother.
Yeah, go back and tell my
He didn't listen to him.
Yeah.
He said, "Son." He said, "Why was this?"
And what's so fun about that parable, right? To go to show that the rich man didn't learn his lesson. When he looked up and saw Lazarus, right? What did he ask Jesus? Let Lazarus just go get some water. Right. He still didn't learn it. He was still trying to treat Lazarus as his lesson. So he still did. And another thing that was amazing to me, and these two other things, he went when he cried out, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means people were saying that he is calling Elijah, right? That kind of confusion, right? Because are the people not even realizing he was quoting Psalms 22, right? So I looked at it and it got a little deeper to me, but I realized he said he cried out in I always can't pronounce Arabic. Arabic, right? They were Hebrew, so when you look at it, Eli sounds the same as Elijah in Hebrew. So for the people way in the Bible that don't understand, he calling Elijah, and watch this, because they thought Jewish belief thought Elijah was gonna come back before. So they said he's crying for Elijah. Then that's why they're saying, well, hold on, let's see if Elijah gonna come.
Well, they could relate to that.
They can relate.
They've been waiting on Elijah.
They can relate to Elijah. But as I was looking at it, right, he quoted verse 1 from Psalm 22, verse 1. But if you dig a little deeper in that psalm, right, David says, "My enemies camped around me." So what Jesus was doing, he was reminding them
What
what David had said is what they're doing. But also, and this is what really got me. The Psalms are what? Hymns. The Psalms are the Hebrew poems and hymn book. You know, you went into the synagogue or somewhere. They had, you know how we have our hymn book. That's what they have. So even at death, Jesus was praising the Lord.
And the thing, you know, that's the thing that hit me. Even though Jesus was coming here to do a new thing, he let them know up front, I ain't coming to destroy it. Oh, I'm coming to make it better.
I come to
I'm coming for field. Because see, everything that y'all talked about and the prophets that talked about, I ain't casting none of this to the side. Say y'all just wait.
If you just wait and just,
you're gonna see everything come to fruition.
and just understand. It not in your timing, but my timing.
And that was the, and I do believe that was Jesus' biggest problem. Just think about the prophet, he never recognized, you know, in his own hometown. And even today and stuff, you know, how many times you see people go, you know, do something, accomplish something, and then you something like some people want to remember the way he used to be. Now,
It's the way he used to be. So yeah, Jesus was even, you know, praising even at the point of death. So no matter what we're going through, no matter what's going on, we should continue to praise, regardless of our situation. But when we look at, especially this story in John, when we look at John and look at Matthew, and just look at resurrection, and kind of got we kind of got a better, as we do it more and study more, the Lord starts to reveal a little bit more to us. He starts to pull back a couple of more layers, and it's crazy because I just said it in the sermon. We're in a better position to receive what He has for us. So,
I got one question.
Yes.
You wanted to, this one I was thinking my problem. Woman, behold your son. And I'm saying, why did Jesus give his mother to one of his disciples, which the brothers were still alive? You know, and that part, that's one of the parts that get me. You know, because all the brothers and sisters were still alive.
Just offhand, the one thing that comes to my mind is the brothers didn't really believe Jesus was who he was until after Jesus after he had, because one of the brothers, James, which is one of the brothers that wrote the book of James, but I think it was James and I can't remember who else, and where it's at in the Bible right now, told Jesus, you need to hush. You need to stop telling people you who you are, because it's causing us trouble. Yeah, right. Then they came to get him, and so
because who was found?
Yeah.
And they said, who is my brother and my sister? You know, anybody who believes, you know, and boy, look him.
Right.
You have to read.
Yeah, and the flip side of that, other thing I think about when he said that, must behold your son, is I've done what I'm supposed to do, right? Now that I go, y'all got to have each other. Father to the fatherless, mother to the motherless. You have to have, you all have to look after each other. So that's the two things that pop in mind when I hear that. Knowing how his brothers,
He felt he wanted to make sure that his mother
was taken care
was
of.
taken care of by somebody who loved her.
Go right. Mm-hmm. Right.
I tell you what, you have to, and you got to, Pastor, you basically got to read for yourself.
Yeah.
And it's good to have discussions like this because it opens up. It's a lot of people who don't get this. Mm-hmm. You know, you sit down there, and I still love a girl we married because that boy called me at 10 o'clock one night and stuff. He was talking about, he said, well, was Paul talking to his brothers? And I said, they never talked about Paul's brothers, but he considered Timothy to be like a son. You know, and I said he was
Right.
He called me 10:30 one night, cause I was reading something and that came up. I said, it's good, baby, just pick a phone, call somebody.
Right.
You imagine if something on your mind, you go to bed with it on your mind, something, you're gonna wake up the next day. Boy, this ain't it.
Yeah. So it is always good, and we always quote, study to show thyself approved, right? But we always look at it as the educational aspect of it. AME Church has taken that and saying, Pastor, you need to have your master's, bachelor's, and master's degree, right? And truthfully, thank God I'm getting a master's degree, and I'm through with it. But I went to one school, changed, went to another one, and you would think the Bible is the main talk, focus. It's not. So yes, study to show thyself approved, and I take it in whatever atmosphere you in, you need to study that playbook. You need to study them rules and regulations, right? So since we're in the church, right, there's a couple of rules and regulations. We need to study the Bible. We need to learn the doctrine and discipline, but we also need some physical education to help understand some of the stuff that we're dealing with.
A preacher just ain't no preacher
no more.
unless you got one of them, like say one of them big churches, you got 4 or 5 minutes to follow. But if you're the same pastor at the church,
It's a lot you got. So
finance, budgeting, you got
So it's a lot that you have to do. So even with the preaching and teaching as members, we should always. That's why I got them lines in there now for notes. Take notes, go back and study for yourself, because you'll find out. Like Monette just said, you know what? I realized that it wasn't the same people that was right. It was different people. But when you hear same people, but when you study it for yourself, you realize now I understand that it wasn't the same people, but the same people that looked like that was Sham Hosanna, and it was the same group of people. And let me just say this way: it was the blacks that it was the blacks that was saying yes, yes, yes. Then it was blacks that were saying crucify, crucify, crucify. It was the same people that looked like him, right? It may not have been. It may not have been us three, but it was somebody that looked like us three.
They was in the same family.
They was in the same group. So yeah, when you hear that Daniel was in the lion's den all night, and that he put his head in the lion, and the lion didn't close, and then you read it, it don't say nothing like that. But I see what he's saying. The Lord protected him, even if the lion tried to bite him, he couldn't. Right. So you got to study for your.
You got to study because everybody said the lion. First thing they said was, and the Lord shut the lion's mouth. But guess what? If a mouth shut, he can't bite.
He can't bite. Right. Even if he tried, he couldn't. So we have to do that. One of and just thinking about this, close this thing out. Real final review. When we look at Resurrection Sunday, when we look at Easter Sunday, when we look at the crucifixion, we got to realize we're being crucified every day. There's a cross for you, there's a cross for me. Jesus said, pick up that cross and follow me, which means we're being crucified every day. And every night we go to sleep, I'm going to use this as the bed is that cross for us. Every night we go to sleep, right? That bed is that cross. And that bed comes from that cross to that grave. And it goes from the grave to getting up that next morning. So in other words, somewhere in that transitioning, whatever you had to deal with the day before, it may have not been complete, right? But it was finished that day. Because the day's struggle is not yesterday's. I mean, you still, and I use this, and you don't mind, bro, on that. The day your son car was stuck in the garage, that was messed up, right? It was still, it may have been stuck in there on Sunday, and still stuck in there Monday. But yesterday, Sunday stuff. When today ain't Monday stuff because you did some stuff to try to get it out on Sunday. And watch this, you're not gonna go back and redo the same thing. So you got to do so. Yesterday's struggle is not today's struggle.
And that's like that makes a lot of sense to it. Since we say we got 50 across daily. That same thing saying you got to confess your sins daily,
right?
Which means you got to be on the same page, synonymous. You can't hold on to it, but you got to acknowledge them, but you got to drive on.
Yeah. Look, there's no doubt in my mind. I love we talk about Paul a lot because of the New Testament, and he wrote a lot of the New Testament. But my main man Peter, there's no doubt in my mind. Peter acting a fool on a daily basis. He was impulsive. But he was a leader. He was one leader because everybody followed. Yeah. They followed Peter. He might have been he was foolish in his way, but they followed him. Peter was the one that said, Lord, you know what? I'm on this boat. Yeah. It's about the same. You out there. Now, if you tell me to come, then he got out there, Paul, he got a little distracted, but I say that to say this. We're probably more like a Peter than a Paul. We are, right? But because we act on our impulse. Sometimes we act before thinking. Every now and then we think before acting. And we ask the Lord to help us. Right. And when he starts happening, we get distracted. So we do a lot of that, but we keep on. We keep on.
And then sometimes we worse than Paul. We think we got it right and we're doing it right. And then it takes some activity to get it back right. Control to actually show that I've been living the wrong way. And this lesson point I could say, you got to encourage. Like I say, you got to encourage yourself. Because if you sit around like I said, you're a negative person, everything you do is negative all day long and stuff.
It's going to be, not only are you going to be negative, everybody around you going to be negative. Yeah. So let's just remember with everything that is going on, especially when you look at the shooting that just happened, and everything, let's just make sure we're being resurrected every day. And we're doing everything we can to help somebody else get resurrected every day.
Thank you, Pastor. I believe our Andy Church School was growing, bro. I was making time.
Make so.
Every member Christian, every Christian worker, every work trained, so the worker need not be ashamed.
This we ask in Jesus' name.
Church School Foundation.
We have come, we have studied, we have learned. So until our next time together, study God's word. May rich blessing reside with you. May grace be eternally yours. Amen.
I tell you what, Joe make you think, don't it? Boy, you sit down and say, this ain't cut and dry and as clear as they've been trying to make it out all these years.
And I think the reason why I ask myself more questions now because I'm studying and learning more. So I'm knowing more scripture. So when I hear the stone, the tombs are over. And then I hear, Paul saying the dead in Christ arise first. And I know the Bible is not a contradiction of itself. Okay, Lord, help me.
You got two different situations. You're supposed to have got up.
Yeah, help me tie this in. And not only that, I know people that have gone. They got loved ones that have gone before me. So,
boy, I tell you what. It is what it is.
So, come on, help me make sense of this. Because if I'm struggling with it, I know there's somebody else that's struggling with it.
Yeah, somebody's struggling. Hey, I had on
They might not say that.
They might not say that,
right?
They might
Well,
not say that.
that's what the problem is, you know, because nobody never want, like you said today, nobody want to ask the question that need to be asked. And see, I was in school, I was always the first thing whenever nobody, yo, school. Hey, I need to know why. Hey,
Help me understand why.
you help me understand this ain't making sense.
Doing all right. Doing good.
Then some people don't know the question.
Lance had a
You
good-
have to go to class,
Yeah.
and they
Early
teaching
morning breakfast.
it.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't understand. What you don't understand, well, I don't know.